Logan Paul did not just sell a Pokémon card, he sold a story, a $16.492 million story, a world record story, a victory lap story. But hidden inside that headline is the part people cannot stop arguing about. This was the same card he once tied to a fractional ownership platform that later collapsed under legal scrutiny in Ontario. So when the champagne popped and the cameras flashed, a lot of collectors were asking one ugly question. Did Logan just pull off the cleanest exit of his career or the slickest looking mess? For years, Logan Paul has understood something better than almost any internet celebrity alive. Attention is not enough. You need spectacle. And this sale had all of it. A one-of-one feeling Grail card, a Guinness adjudicator in the room, a live audience, a famous auction house, a billionaire-style reveal. And the final number is so ridiculous it instantly became headline bait across mainstream media, sports media, collectibles media, and social media all at once. On February 16, 2026, Logan Paul's PSA 10 Pikachu Illustrator sold for $16.492 million, making it the most expensive trading card ever sold at auction. On paper, that sounds like the perfect Logan Paul ending. He bought the card in 2021 in a record-setting deal valued at $5.275 million. He wore it at WrestleMania, he turned it into content, then he sold it for more than triple that number and got another world record moment on top. But this story does not start with the auction. It starts with what Logan tried to turn the card into before the auction. Back in 2022, during the trading card boom, Logan was deep in Pokémon content. Big openings, rare boxes, giant valuations, huge flexes. Around that same time, Liquid Marketplace pitched itself as a way for people to buy fractional stakes in physical collectibles. Logan was not some distant celebrity paid to smile for the camera either. He publicly presented himself as a co-founder, and the Pikachu Illustrator became one of the platform's marquee assets. The pitch was simple and powerful. You may never afford the whole Grail, but maybe you can own a piece of it. And that is where the story gets messy. Because when collectors saw Logan sending the same card to Goldin years later, the obvious question came back fast. Wait, what happened to the people who were told they co-owned part of this thing? In late 2025, Logan told Collect he had purchased Liquid Marketplace's interest in the card for $250,000 in May 2024. Then, after the record sale triggered fresh backlash, he posted a public explanation saying that while up to 51% of the Illustrator had originally been offered on Liquid, only 5.4% was actually sold for around $270,000 in the summer of 2022. He said he bought that stake back in 2024 at the same price, consistent with the platform's terms, and that the funds were made available for withdrawal. Legally, that's the center of Logan's defense. He's basically saying the dramatic version people remember is bigger than what actually happened. And to be fair, there is a meaningful difference between Logan sold half the card to the public and only 5.4% of the card was ever sold. That difference matters. It changes the scale of the story immediately. It also matters that Collect reported Logan was not named in the Ontario enforcement proceeding. But here's the problem. Legal cleanup and public trust are not the same thing, because the Ontario Securities Commission did not accuse Liquid Marketplace of having a minor paperwork issue. In June 2024, the OSC alleged the company and top executives were involved in a multi-layered fraud, including misleading representations around tokenized assets and the misappropriation of about $3 million of more than $10 million raised. Again, Paul was not named in that proceeding, but the platform attached to his card was now sitting under a cloud that was far darker than normal internet drama. That's why the sale landed the way it did online. To one group, this looked like a brilliant flip. To another, it looked like a man cashing out a hype object after years of chaos, while the people who bought into the earlier vision were left getting their principal back, not the upside. And in collectibles, that fairness gap matters. Maybe the contract said one thing, but emotionally, many people heard a much uglier version. You helped validate the story early, then watched the main guy collect the giant ending alone. And then there was the grading controversy. Even if you remove Liquid Marketplace completely, the card still had critics. Parts of the hobby have been arguing about that PSA 10 grade for a while, with creators like Rattle Pokémon pushing the idea that the card's grading history deserves more scrutiny. That gave the backlash a second life online, because now the criticism was no longer just about fractional ownership. It was also about whether the centerpiece itself had been elevated into myth too neatly. So think about how that looks in the feed. You scroll past one post showing a world record sale. Another post says the same card had a messy ownership history. Another says the grade is questionable. Another says the site went offline. Another says people can now withdraw money. And then the whole thing ends with Logan, Goldin, applause, a Guinness plaque, and a buyer talking about a planetary treasure hunt. It's almost too perfect, which for Logan Paul is exactly why people don't trust it. That buyer, AJ Scaramucci, framed the purchase as part of a hunt for the uncollectible, a world where a Pikachu Illustrator sits in the same fantasy lane as dinosaur fossils and the Declaration of Independence. And that's the weirdest part of this entire story. The card itself stopped being just a card a long time ago. It became a flex object, a content prop, a financial instrument, a cultural artifact, and then, finally, a record-setting luxury headline. Meanwhile, Logan used the moment to tease a new collectibles venture, RipIt, built around wait lists, referrals, leaderboards, and prize-based hype. So for critics, the timing couldn't have been worse. Right after the card tied to one controversial platform becomes a record sale, a new gamified collectibles pitch appears on stage. Even if the business model is different, the vibe was enough to set off alarms. And that's the real reason this story hit so hard. It's not only about a Pokémon card. It's about whether Logan Paul has mastered the internet's most profitable trick. Turn every scandal into content, turn every backlash into reach, turn every question mark into a bigger headline. Because the final image here is almost absurd. A card once marketed as a shared collectible dream ends up as a $16.492 million trophy in a room full of cameras, while the man at the center of it gets to look shocked, grateful, and victorious all at once. Maybe he followed the terms. Maybe he didn't owe anyone more than that. But when a story ends with one guy holding the record and everyone else holding a login link, people are going to talk. And that's why this sale felt less like a clean win and more like a perfect Logan Paul ending. Huge, profitable, historic, and just messy enough that the argument around it might outlive the record itself. So what do you think this really was? A fair buyback followed by a legendary sale? Or a record-breaking cash-out that left the worst part of the story buried under confetti? Drop your take below. Because in Logan Paul's world, the auction may be over, but the real fight always starts after the headline.